Hi, here's a quick little overview of 3D tools in Illustrator. There's basically three of them, and if you've used any other kinds of 3D tools in the past, these shouldn't be surprising to you. But let's just walk through them. I'm going to do the easiest one first, and in fact it's so easy I always forget about it. So all of the tools I just selected. Rotate. If you go under Effect to 3D, and these tools have been around for several versions of Illustrator, at least CS, probably CS3, CS2 maybe. But in any case, Effect 3D, and I'll just choose Rotate to begin with. And you have this little cube that you can drag around and control in here. Now right now preview's turned off, which is good because it gets to be kind of tedious to do it. So I'm going to just kind of position this cube and imagine the text being on this slightly bluer face. And if I turn on preview, you can see what it's doing. It's rotating it. Now let me tilt it, and you can see it takes it a second. It goes into kind of a vector format, and then it shows it again. Right now there's no perspective, so it's just doing kind of this mechanical 3D quality. But if I put in an angle in here, get it to be more of what we would see with our own eyes or with a zoom lens or something here, I'll set it around 60 degrees. You can see that this edge of the lettering is more tilted than the lettering as it comes over to the side. So it's going to diminish into space, and off here, somewhere up here, it would hit a vanishing point, just like a 3D that we think of. Now there's some other things in here. You'll notice there's some junk showing up that shouldn't stay there once we click OK, and we'll zoom in and take a look if it does. There's surface shading that you can put on this. And basically once you go to diffuse shading, I'm looking at more options. If I choose fewer options, you see where that's coming from. I can drag this around. This is kind of a light source. But again, since it's a flat shape and diffuse shading, it's just, you don't notice much of a difference. It's just that the color does change. If you want your color to stay the same, you can just choose no shading, and then it keeps the color you've got. Notice that there's this nice little checkbox for preserve spot colors if you're happening to do this on a piece that has spot colors. This is a good idea so that you don't get process color separation if you're doing this effect with spot color work. And again, you can fiddle around with these things if you want. There's some kind of built-in ones as well. So that's the rotate one. Pretty straightforward. Next one I'm going to show you is Extrude. Now I'm going to just extrude this with just text with just a plain black shape, and you'll see the problem here in a second. So again, Effect, 3D, and we'll just choose Extrude and Bevel. If I turn on the preview, you'll notice it looks terrible, and it's just because the edge that's coming off of it is black as well as the face. So instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a yellow stroke on this before I go ahead and do the extrusion. And the yellow stroke, while it's not very effective here, will be very effective once we start to do the extrusion. So now I turn this on, click preview, and now all of a sudden we have some shading through here, and it works quite a bit better. Wonder if I can zoom in a bit. Let me turn off preview here, and we're gonna come in. I want to adjust perspective a little, and for right now we'll just use the default rotation. It works very much the other way as the rotate one did as well. We have a depth that we can extrude to, so obviously the shorter amount, if I put in something like 25, it's going to be a smaller extrusion, or we can bump that up so that it's bigger as well. That's pretty easy to figure out. Then there's this thing called Bevel, and Bevel is kind of odd. If I pop this open, you'll notice all of a sudden it starts looking really bad through here. That's because the bevel on this is 4 points, and it's also beveling on the inside. If I click on this so that it bevels on the outside, it tends to look a little better. Let's try it out. There we go, and you can see now there's a strong beveled edge coming off from the lettering up to where the extrusion starts, and then it starts going back. The problem with this, of course, is that our type is kind of running into each other. So I'm going to set this value to something like 2 points, and we should see a little cleaner bevel there. There we go. So that builds it out. You can also decide whether or not you're going to have end caps on these. By default, it has end cap. If I turn this off, let's see if we see anything. Yeah, so now it just looks kind of like a pipe that we're looking through that has this extrusion in it. Might be more handy for some things than others. For text, obviously, having the caps on there is nice. Our surface shading gets a little more interesting too. We can have a diffuse shade rather than a plastic shade. I thought I chose that. Let's see. And again, you can. Some of this is just because it's slow in rendering. And we can also switch around the light source. So if I move the light source here, we should see it update. There we go. You can see some problems with the beveling here. It starts to chop things up. So let's see if I can remedy this just by setting this down to 1 point. And now the bevel looks kind of weak as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose no bevel on here. And just go with that amount. So that looks pretty good. So again, we understand the perspective from the previous one that we used. We adjusted depth and caps, and now we'll and some shading things. All right, so that's extrude, and then finally the last one is rotate. So I can go in and under effect, I drew a little edge. Let me explain this just for a second. This is just a little line that I drew. It just has a stroke. If you have a fill in there, it's going to look funky when you revolve this. So don't have a fill on it, just have a stroke. And then we'll go under here to 3D, come down to revolve. Sometimes 3D programs call this lathe, depending on the program. By default, it'll close up on itself 360 degrees. And you'll see when you do this, you get kind of a cup looking thing. I made something that looks kind of like a, I don't know, a chalice or something like that. Now mine is a little skinny just because it's offsetting from this point, and it's offsetting 0 points. So if you get something that's kind of skinny through here like I'm getting, just add an amount to the offset, and that expands it out. And again, if I click and drag this around, well, we don't get much here because I'm just rotating it. Let me move this around this way. You can see how this works out. I didn't build much of a bottom to it, so it's just got kind of this hollow bottom. If I drag it around this way, now we can see that. And again, we can apply perspective if we want. There's not a huge change here since we're dealing with ellipses, but it does a little bit. Now again, we're getting kind of a redraw thing happening. That'll probably clean itself up once we deal with this a little bit further. So that's how you get the initial setup. Now let me show you one other thing. You can map art. I'm going to go ahead and press OK for this, and we're getting a little bit of a screen redraw thing. Let me zoom in. See if I can, there we go. If we zoom in, zoom out, you can see it cleans that stuff up. What I want to do is map something onto this. So let's just make some goofy text. And the way that you can map art onto this, just think of it like a decal, is you have to turn your artwork into a symbol first. So I'm going to just open up my symbol window here, and I'll just click and drag this over to add it as a symbol, and just say OK to that. Good. Now I'm going to click on this item, and how do we get back to that after we've used it? Just like anything in Illustrator, the appearance palette is always our friend. So I'm going to click open appearance. Notice that when appearance is selected, if we scroll down, hey, we see that there's 3D revolve. So I can actually click on this and go right back into that editing window. And I'll go ahead and turn on preview, and I'm going to choose map art. And with map art, there's a number of different things that get highlighted here. So for instance, we could map art onto the top of this if we wanted. And what I'm going to do is flip through here until I get to the part that I want. And sometimes it's hard to tell because I think this might be the inside just from previous experience. So I'm going to flip down to till we get to that again, and I think the next one will be the outside. Again, with 3D, this is thinking of this as like a UV map. And then it says symbol, none. I'm going to go ahead and pop this open. There's my new symbol. It appears on here. Let's drag it around and see if we can get it to appear. Yeah, there it is. So now I can drag it around on this place. And again, the font I chose was pretty lame for this, but I did it mainly just so you could see that you could map art on. I can size it up if I want, or maybe in this case having it just a little bit smaller would be better. There we go. And it's just like applying a little bit of a decal on here, but it has to be turned into a symbol before you can do that. And then once it's in there, go ahead and press OK, and that pops on. Now again, I could revolve this around, so maybe I want to turn this just a little bit, and we can see how that symbol that we've applied is kind of stuck now to that surface as we build it out. Now, last thing. So the last thing about 3D stuff is they are vector effects. So if you print this, it's going to print out at the highest resolution available to you. But let's say you need to, for whatever reason, you need to do some other work with this. You might choose to expand this artwork. Remember that expand is a great option whenever you need to do some kind of simplification. So if I click on this artwork right now, in fact if I go to outline mode, Command Y, you'll notice that you don't see any 3D effects. But I could come in and I can expand any of these things just by going under Object, Expand Appearance. And when I do that, let's look at this in outline mode, you'll see it's turned into a really complex blend. So now this artwork is as complex as it is, it's actually simpler than it was in the 3D mode, but it's frozen like this. I can't ever go back, I can't ever turn it around. You'll notice that in the appearance palette there's no sense of the 3D option available to me, as opposed to something like this guy. Their 3D is always available. So expand is available in cases if you need to take this artwork and either bring it into an earlier version of Illustrator, or maybe do something on it like move it in perspective.